point, we want to thank you for being. This is From the Desk of the Editor. Dr. Thompson and I are going to tune in to hear portions of the State of the City, and then we're going to come back with our open mic. And if you have your questions or comments, you remember you can call in, and we can take your live calls. And you know the number that we have here? 858-251-6111.
Yes, sir.
Or you can join us on online at godradio1.com. Okay, so at this point, we're going to switch over to the Mayor's State of the City address.
And Dr. Jen Campbell for their support of these updates in committee, and I'm looking forward to the full City Council's consideration early this year. Now, some of you are probably sitting there thinking, what the heck took the city so long to do this? And I agree. Any of you that know me well can tell you that I am impatient by nature. Impatient for progress and impatient to deliver results for the people of this city. For example, I love a good groundbreaking, but you know what I like even better? A ribbon cutting. We ain't got no time to waste, right? Let's go, right? You know, it was at a ribbon cutting for the Fairbrook Neighborhood Park that I met the Winter family. Stephen, Jennifer, and their sons, Carson and Jackson. The Winters moved into their home in Scripps Ranch in 2013. When they moved in, there was a large empty lot behind their home that was set to become a public park. They were told that it would happen within 3 years, and Stephen and Jennifer were happy that their kids would still be young enough to enjoy it. You already know. That land remained vacant for a decade. But this year, you guys, we finally got it done. And these days, Carson and Jackson are using the park regularly to play pickleball and basketball and hang out with their friends. The Winter family are here with us this evening, including their eldest son, Austin, who unfortunately had to go off to college before that park was completed. Austin, buddy, I'm sorry. You can enjoy it on the weekends and on the holidays. How about that? We're working to make sure that families like the Winters won't have to wait so long for neighborhood improvements. In fact, Fairbrook Neighborhood Park was one of 9 new parks that we opened in 2022, and we completed upgrades on 15 more. This was more park improvements than the city's completed in any of the past 6 years. And this year, we're on track to open 13 new parks and upgrade 18 more as a part of our Parks for All of Us master plan, which was adopted by the City Council last year. It's not just parks. Construction is underway on the new Torrey Pines Fire Station, and we've begun work on both the Skyline Hills and Fairmont fire stations. We also broke ground on the new Branch Library and Pacific Highlands Ranch and secured funding for the new Oak Park branch. And yeah, give it up, Oak Park. I'm into that. I'm into that. And major improvements are coming soon to the branch libraries in Ocean Beach, City Heights, San Carlos, and Linda Vista. I'm so happy to see this progress all across our city, and I've empowered our city staff to find more ways to get things done faster. And I recognize that there will always be roadblocks of some kind, but our job is to find a way around them, or over them, or under them, or through them to deliver for San Diegans. What we won't do is push the big costs and hard choices out a few years to satisfy us today. We've seen what deferring maintenance and investment has done on assets like streets, sidewalks, and parks. What's harder to see, but no less real, is the grave impact it's had on our most important asset, our dedicated city employees. Chronic underinvestment in our city workforce is one of the main reasons that today we're experiencing delays in services, fixing streetlights, issuing permits, collecting trash on schedule. Record low unemployment is also a part of that challenge. But let's be honest, many of the city's hiring woes were self-inflicted. The pension underfunding scheme was short-sighted and wrong, but so too was the response. The lack of retirement security combined with relatively low pay made us uncompetitive in the labor market. And here's the thing, Investing in our workforce is investing in our neighborhoods. It's ensuring that your city government is accessible, responsive, and in service to our communities. This past year, we reached agreements with each of our employee organizations, and we have worked to reverse the policies that made us less competitive by restoring pensions, bringing pay and benefits more in line with other municipal agencies, and rewarding special skills and training. I want to say very clearly tonight to all of you that San Diego is and will continue to be a pro-worker city. Full staffing is important across all of our city services, but it is absolutely critical for public safety. When anyone in our city calls 911, you should get a fast, effective response from a well-trained, well-equipped first responder. And our city is truly blessed to have some of the most dedicated and committed first responders serving the people of San Diego, many of whom are here this evening. Would you give it up for our police officers, our firefighters, our paramedics, our lifeguards? I thank every single one of you and all of our city employees. We thank you, we value you. You make our city work, and I'm grateful. Let me brag on them a little bit. Last year, our firefighters and our paramedics responded to over 180,000 emergencies. Our lifeguards performed over 8,000 water rescues as they guarded the safety of 21 million people at our beaches and bays. Members of our fire rescue team are in Northern California tonight, saving people and property in the storm. In the contracts approved this year, we provided our first responders with a 10% raise, showing that we value their life-saving work and are committed to making their compensation competitive with other regional agencies. And as a part of our effort to reach full staffing in the police department and address a chronic shortage of officers, an issue that's...
Well, Dr. Warren, that was just a little bit of the State of the Union. Want to get back to from the desk of the editor.
Well, thank you, Dr. Thompson, and we do want to get back to it. The statement is going to be out. It'll be in the press tomorrow. We have copies of it. People have a chance to have reactions to the things that the mayor said. But I think that some of the kind of issues that we're talking about are not necessarily in the address that he's giving this evening about the city, because we know we still have a number of serious problems. I want to cite, for example, the ongoing misconduct of the San Diego Police Department and how they are treating people of color, African Americans in particular, the liberties that they're taking with folks in terms of stopping them, doing searches, extending it not only to their houses, their cars, but their homes, when the only person that's supposed to have a waiver for a search is persons who are on parole or probation. And so there's this ongoing hostile attitude toward African Americans by some white police officers, not just in San Diego City, but period, as we see incident after incident across this nation. And you would think that behind George Floyd and all of the exposures that we've made about police misconduct, that this wouldn't continue. Yet I just saw the other day a situation in Phoenix where the Wall Street Journal reporter was trying to conduct a survey outside of a Chase Bank. And he had on casual clothes and a Afro wig. And the next thing you know, somebody called the police. The officer doesn't ask him to leave. He wants to handcuff him. He handles him roughly. He's trying to put him in a car, but fortunately, a bank customer, and I'm assuming that she was Caucasian, but in her tone, she saw what was happening and pulled out her phone and recorded the whole thing. Then when more officers came, they finally had the bank branch manager come out and apologize, and they let him go. But this is ongoing stuff. And I think that we've got to be more diligent this year. We got to be more diligent in how we respond to all of these things that happen. We can't just be casual. We can't take the attitude, if it's reported and it didn't happen to me, well, I don't care, because first the other person, if you stay here, your day will come. And so I know, for instance, with Black Men and Women United, we are moving in the direction of trying to be more accountable and to be more proactive in 2023 than we've been before in a very long time.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important, Dr. Warren, is being proactive. A lot of times people are reactive. And when something happens, they react to it. But we know that there is a systemic issue across the board with the abuse of authority, not only in the police department, but in most major uh, business and bureaucracies that are set up. And we have to bring light to it, and then not only bring light to it, but continue to press the issue until we see change. A lot of times, I call it, and I say this in the black community, there is the buy off. You know, they select a supreme leader, and once they select the supreme leader, they then give that supreme leader a budget, and then that budget then calculates into them going back and trying to calm the restless spirits of people that are in the community, and they let that one voice be that single story. Well, in this time, in this and age with the technology, no longer can you look for just one voice to represent a community. There are multiple voices and multiple experiences, and we have to, number one, don't get caught up in the buy off. Number one. Number two is not just be reactive, but be proactive. And we are intelligent people. We see it coming many times before it even happens. So we should prepare for it before it happens instead of just sitting back and waiting for it to happen.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Dr. Thompson, and we do have to become proactive as we look at the situation here where we are. You know, we have a police chief who is in the drop program. He's going to be leaving soon. We've got this one African American deputy in particular on the seventh floor, and it's very interesting that for the 15 years or so that we've had Black Men and Women United, we've had a partnership with our African American brothers and sisters on the force. But this young individual decided that their feelings were hurt or they were spoken to with disrespect in terms of the meeting, and therefore none of the officers come. And I served notice the other day, and I served notice here, that if his name comes up to become a chief of police, I will oppose it with every fiber of my being, because we have passed the day that we need people who look like us, who don't care about us, and who are afraid to speak up and be representative of us. And so we have real problem here, and we're still getting people pulled over. We're still getting people harassed. We're still suffering the experience of living while Black in terms of what's happening. And a lot of us need to come off a recess and get out of this anesthetized state that it doesn't matter to me. Reassess your priorities, how you're spending your money, who your friends are, where you go, how your brothers and sisters are treated. You know, one thing about it, I'm going to be very brief with this, but if you look at some of the old movies that predated us, the movies where Blacks like Jackie Robinson and others were being trailblazers, they did things, or the Tuskegee Airmen. They took a lot of stuff because they realized that it wasn't just about them, but it was about everybody that looked like them. And we seem to have graduated to the point now that it's no longer about us, it's about me. And the me's can't survive. And so we need to wake up, we need to get back in touch spiritually, which is important, because we're not going to make it otherwise. There are not enough dollars. There are not enough dollars out there to buy off the evil and the attacks that are coming toward us. We need to have a spiritual awakening as a people and get back to being concerned about each other. And when people see that we respect ourselves, then they will respect us.
Well, you know, one of the things, Dr. Warren, I think that is, you know, they say if you know your history, you know your greatness. For some reason, there's this fantasy that every Black person spoke well of Martin Luther King, and he was treated nicely everywhere he went. And that everywhere he went, there was this level of respect. That people also on the fantasy that everywhere that Malcolm X went, as long as he was in the Brotherhood, he was treated fairly nice. People are under the fantasy that Jackie Robinson, when he went to be around people that looked like him, that they all received him. And I think that is the fallacy that we have to now get past. you're going to go and you're not going to always be received the way you feel you should be received. But if you understand the sacrifices and the things that have taken place to be able to open the doors for you, then you come and you literally build relationships and change the narrative.
Because
Now,
you know who you are.
yeah,
You know who you are.
can I say this? 'Cause
Sure.
I want you to, when I became 20, no, 34 years ago, when I came into the Unified School District, and I was one of 4 men hired to lead this project for African American young men. I thought that the brotherhood of our city would get behind a young guy, 23, 24 years old, and they would be behind me. And I remember walking up to the school that I was serving, and I saw one of the community icons leaders, and I expected I was going to get this love and this all this, and he looked at me and said, "You don't deserve the job. You didn't earn the job." And then he said, "And you will fail." And I said to him at that time, "Thank you so much for your support. I look to see you being around here, and we'll talk." 4 years later, that same person who said, and I'm using the nice version of what he said, that same person came up to me 4 years later and said, "I didn't think that you would be able to make it this far, but you far exceeded my expectations, and I'm proud of you." So sometimes, young, middle age, wherever you're at in the thing, not everybody's going to receive your appointment when you get it. But if you stay the course and literally show them that you are there to be proactive and not reactive, then it might take a year or two, but the respect level, because there are retired officers that we work with right now, that there's a respect level, but they built it based on relationship. So I'm encouraging people to know that you're not always going to be received, no matter if it's the church, no matter if it's your community, but even Jesus wasn't received in his own home, but he still did great work.
Yes. Well, you said a lot there in that statement, Dr. Thompson, and you triggered a lot of memories for me. I happen to have been in the room, and I'm old enough to have been there with Dr. King. When the March on Washington occurred, I was there. I was telling my wife this evening, looking at a clip, I was trying to find a tree that I climbed up like Zacharias, and I sat in a tree during that whole hot day while people were making speeches. But so much strife and contention took place before that meeting. And everybody was happy or in love with him. I had the same kind of personal contact with Malcolm X. And not everybody, we know everybody wasn't in love with him, but we still saw people who were setting an example because they were committed to what they were doing. I was 27 or 28 when I first got elected to office. And I remember I had a contentious meeting one night. And after the meeting was over, this elderly white gentleman came up to me as I was gathering up my things from the podium. And he says to me, "Mr. Warren," and I turned and looked at him and I said, "Yes." He says, "I don't like you." And I paused. Fortunately, I didn't say anything. I just paused for a moment because it just took me by surprise. But then he said to me, he says, "But I sure as hell respect you." And the respect is something we have to earn. You see, we got a bunch of young people out here today that think they can command respect with the color that they wear or a gun or whatever. That's not respect. That's fear. But respect comes as a byproduct of service and caring about others and being committed beyond yourself. And so I still believe there's hope here. When I came to San Diego many, many years ago, and I came here and people were telling me I wouldn't make it here and I wasn't a part of any clique. I didn't belong to any fraternity. I wasn't Alpha or Q or anything. And a gentleman who is now deceased came up to me, and this was around the time I was first trying to do something with the paper. And he makes this statement to me. He says, "You know what?" He says, "The only way you're going to make it in San Diego is to cut off your testicles and ship them back to where you came from." And I just looked at him with disdain and unbelief because I had been around too much black greatness to come with that attitude. I don't think it was an accident that I was with Shirley Chisholm or Adam Powell or Gus Hawkins or with princes and leaders of foreign countries, and in the White House with presidents, that I'm supposed to now come back and assume the grateful nigger position. And so I want to see us rise up to who we are. And maybe tonight is too much of a sermon for some of you and you don't want to hear it. But I think this is a good time at the beginning of a new year to rethink what our priorities are and to rethink what kind of service we're going to be of to someone other than ourselves. And maybe if they want to call in on that, Dr. Thompson, we can entertain a comment. But I just feel on fire to push that out there tonight, that we got to wake up and get involved.
And the reality is that somebody might say, well, the state of the city is going on right now. It's playing in the background. We have the speech. After it's over, we can even talk even more about statements and things that are coming out. But it's like life is happening around us, and it's sometimes we get off kilter of realizing that life is happening. So now we have to prioritize. God first, family second. And for me, community third, and sometimes the community might, go, sometimes my family has to sacrifice a little bit, but at the same point, the community is important because this is where our families are living in. And if we as leaders, I remember, and Dr. Warren, you probably remember this, I think I was real young in the business. And I came to you one day and I said, Dr. Warren, I want to know if you could be my mentor. You say, I don't have time to mentor nobody and everything else that nature. And I walked away with my feelings hurt. And I think a week later I came back and just kept coming back because that's the thing that I think is that stick-to-itness. This because you get the first answer. I as being now older, I understand why it was said to me because every day someone wants you to mentor them and you look at your day and you've spent the whole day working with other people and have done absolutely nothing for what you're set to do.
But there's another piece to that, Dr. Thompson, and it took me a while to get it. Sometimes as we get older, we don't realize we become elders. Okay, and so you got people coming up asking you to do stuff, and as far as you're concerned, your stuff ain't over yet. What are you talking about? I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
And then you realize that you've accumulated some information that can make it a little easier for somebody else who's coming down the path. Because, the inscription over the archives in Washington says what is past is prologue. And so it's a cyclical thing. And it all just keeps coming around. It keeps coming around. And it's a question of how we deal with it. Ecclesiastes tells us in the Bible in the 3rd chapter, and to each thing there's a time and a season, and a season for everything under the sun. And so right now I'm into having people, let's discover what season you're in. Let's discover what spiritual season you're in, what financial season you're in, and what season do you want to see a harvest in, because you got to do a seed sowing now. And maybe it's helping a neighbor. Maybe it's taking somebody a box of food or a bottle of water or taking them to a doctor's appointment or everything isn't about you reaching in your pocket, getting your last dime. We've got to be willing to give more of ourselves. And it's hard. It's hard when you're dealing with selfish people who don't care about you other than what they can get from you. So you cannot be helping people based on what you think their thank you is going to be. Yeah. You got to be doing what it is based on what God calls you to do.
And Dr. Warren, I say to people all the time that in my city, 50% of the people love me. Yeah. And 50% of people can't stand me. But it changes daily based on what I can do for them at that moment. And I tell people this all the time because a lot of times people always expect the weather to be fair and the weather to be sunny. And sometimes you're not going to have that sunny weather. But what I love about my seniors and I love about children, they both have no filters. They just tell you the way it is. And it is so comical for like my grandbaby. She had heard an adult say something to another adult. And so the person said it so much that she thought it was just normal. So when somebody got into her way, she said the exact same thing she heard an adult say, and it shocked everybody. But she was 4 years old, no filter, heard it, and it worked for
And
that other person.
and they repeat what they hear.
Exactly. Well, with the seniors, they get to a point where they just say what it is, and they don't. There's no filter. There's just, I'm old enough now that I'm gonna say it the way it is. And the thing about it, but if you sit long enough with children and seniors, you will learn so much of how to be grateful, how to be cognizant, how to be present. And I think that that's what's missing right now is that we're bypassing the babies and we're bypassing the seniors, and we think everything is in the midst of this what I call the young revolution. And the young revolution used to be like the 20s, early 30s. Now the young revolution is going all the way to 50, and they still think that they still is young. And but the reality comes in is that we have to take the time to not always wear our feelings on our shoulders or out in public, but to push through to see what the end is going to be and what we can learn. Either we're going to learn what to do or what not to do.
Well, let's do this too, Dr. Thompson. I don't ever want to be so remiss that we don't acknowledge that there's a whole cadre of young people out there, people of all ages who are doing good. And so often they don't get the recognition because we're so busy fighting with the ones who aren't doing anything. But we got a bunch of good people. We got good people at every turn. And, you know, when you hear tonight the mayor's giving the state of the city, that's just the state of the city as he and some people with him see it. You look at the state of the city in terms of where you live, what your circumstances are, what your needs are, and how they're being addressed. If you're homeless, then the state of your city is homelessness, and you want to know how is it going to be addressed. If you're hungry, the state of your city is a need for food because you are challenged in terms of having something to eat. And this weather is cold and it's wet and it's damp. And so we need to look at where we are. You know, people glorify State of the Union, State of the City addresses, and State of the District. Everybody's got a state, you know. The Urban League does an annual State of Black America, and it just really is not reflective of everything that we know about Black America. But a lot of this comes from, this state concept comes from a poem, you know, and the poem was written about the Union, and it said, spoke of the Union as a ship, and it says, "Thou too, O Union, strong and great, sail on, O ship of state. Humanity in all its fears and all its hopes for future years is hanging breathlessly in thy fate." Well, our future hangs in our fate if we put our hands in his hands, and we look at what people are doing without a government handout, without a grant, without a contract, but just the sheer coming together like the people of the Ukraine that have a common bond and they're fighting and they're committed to what they're doing. And we need to regain our commitment because what's happened, especially to Black Americans, is that we're on neutral and recess. And we have the African communities and Haitians and the Latinos and Ukraine and all these people coming here understanding the concept of the American dream. And they're going to grab and take, and we're going to be left on the sidelines fussing about what we gave up because we were too busy doing fast food, potato chips, beer, and trying to get a license for a cannabis shop as opposed to getting involved in what we could do to make a change.
So I want to jump in on that because I saw a story on Facebook, and the family in the community that they lived in, if your house got paid off, you changed your door to red, so that everybody knew that you have paid off your mortgage.
Okay.
Well, this family was standing outside. They all had on, the little Christmas pajamas on, and it might have been about 10, 15 of them. And they were standing out there and they were celebrating paying off their mortgage in 4 years. But what I noticed was there was a group of folks that was living in the house, and they had paid off the mortgage, and now they're looking to buy another house, put the families in it, pay it off, and buy another house. We cannot hate on Asian, Latinos, or any other culture that literally will go 12, 15 deep in a house, get a house, pay it off, go get another house, pay it off, and keep on expanding until everybody has a house and a car.
Well, I saw that here in the late 80s and all through the 90s when we were still having some homes built. And there was a time that, like Kings Row and houses in Bonita and different places, that when they started breaking ground, people lined up and they paid folks to sleep in line overnight so that they would be the ones to get to make a bid and purchase a home, even as it was coming out of the ground. But see, here's two things that happened then. And this was before the banks collapsed and merged and did all of that. The one big thing happened was that they would bring all these people together, like you said. Some would sleep in the bathtub, on the floor, wherever, and they all had their little rice bowl and they all ate and shared. And then they put together the minimum amount of money. In those days, in the 80s and the 90s, if you could put down 25% of the cost of a home, then you did not have to go through all of the conditional sales contracts and the credit checks and everything that was involved. Plus, this country gave, our whole financial system gave breaks to people who were refugees that they didn't give to citizens. Because if you showed up at 40 years old and you were trying to buy a piece of property, the first thing they're going to tell you is you don't have a credit history.
Yep.
And your position is, well, of course not, because I've already paid for everything. Well, I'm sorry, you don't have a credit history. Here comes Mr. Garcia, who just came across the boat with a green card, and he's trying to buy something, and he can go to the same bank and get a $5,000 credit card, line of credit. He has no credit history, but the system doesn't require that of him. So now we have discovered, by going back and doing our research and analysis, that this country has been racist against us in terms of housing from day one. And a few months ago, I ran excerpts from the ad hoc coalition on housing that did a report on homelessness among Black San Diegans. Folks, we need to pay attention to this. I went back into the restrictive covenants, how they tried to keep us from buying property, and they put conditions in that people couldn't sell to Blacks or Jews in terms of keeping us out. That very Housing Act that was celebrated some 50 years was racist in its origin. The GI Bill was racist in its origin. It gave loans and credits to white soldiers that it didn't give to us. And now we know something that's very interesting. Health and Human Services, the federal department, and studies say that your longevity in this country is determined by your zip code. Where you live determines how long you're going to live based on the conditions that are there with where you live. So I'm hoping that as we keep talking this up, that some people are going to wake up. You know, it was Marcus Garvey that said, talked about the sleeping giant being awakened, and which we were, and it looked like we got up for a moment, but too many of us have laid back down.
Well, I think what is so important is that we have to, one, desire to come back together and desire to build community and family. Number one. Number two, I think it is important that our motivation cannot only be driven by money, making money, and being famous or being, in quote unquote, an influencer. Number two is that we have to change the narrative for our children. Our children have to see us in a different light because, again, the way I saw my elders when I was growing up, a lot of our children don't see those same elders today. So their level of respect, their level of how they respond is totally different. And so we have to, as elders, we have as leaders, begin to allow the younger people to see a difference in us, because the generation that is just the me generation. It's all about me. It's all about how I can bling, how I can flash, and how I can do this. And we're still not telling our children that they're beautiful. that, you know, I wrote a thing for young people, and I said, you are a designer original. You don't have to write on yourself, poke holes in yourself. When God made you, he made you so original that there's nobody that can duplicate you.
You're just one of a kind.
You know, and we have to sow that into them, because so much negativity is sown into our young people and now our young adults and our adults in general through the social media and everything, that so much what I call, you know, how they say, remember how they say in the computer game, garbage in is garbage out, good data in, good data out. But if you got bad data in, it's going to be bad data out. So we're getting a lot of bad data. And because of the bad data, it's literally affecting even how they see themselves, how they see their community. When, and I'm going to get off this soapbox, but when did African American women ever needed to add any more to their curves? And now somebody has convinced them that they need to augment themselves to the point of freakishness. It's unacceptable, but it starts basically us getting back to loving ourselves and literally working together as a unit.
Well, you know, there's the expression in the Bible when you get into the love songs of Solomon, and people try to dress this up, but you know, the sweetheart makes this statement. She says, "O ye daughters of Jerusalem, I am black, but I am beautiful," and it's just the idea that he was talking about a love affair with a black woman was too much for some of them to handle. And so we need to be back to appreciating each other. I see so much beauty with us, and a lot of it is being trashed by all of the tattoos and the markings and the foul language. And too many young women don't have the right kind of role models that they are supposed to get some idea of who they are, and they don't have to settle for less, you know. But we don't want to. We're not going to preach at it. We're opening it up, and I don't know if anyone has taken us up on calling in with thoughts or comments, but we come from a day and time when we did take time to think and comment on what we heard. It was our coming together talking that led to so much of the change that came out of our time. And it was it was like that open marketplace where people are sharing with, which is so important.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that we are in such a critical state that a lot of people just don't know where to start, so they just don't move at all?
I think that's true for some. And I also think that when people have been rejected for so long or downtrodden, or you got a life full of mistakes, you reached a point where you might think it's over, doesn't make any difference, there's nothing going to work. And then you're trying to judge things in terms of the future of your life by what you see, and not understanding that you have the ability to make it what it should be. And so that means that, as we say, you have to faith it till you make it. You know, 2 Corinthians 5:7 says we walk by faith and not by sight. And so we've got to get away from living up to what other people say about us. They got negative comments about us, so we get negative in terms of what we say. And many of us walk around with a chip on our shoulder and just negative and hostile. You say good morning to some people, they look at you and cuss you out. Well, you got to get to the point that you just don't react to that, and that takes a while. It takes a long time to get there. That you understand that that's their problem and not your problem because of what they said to you.
And I think that is the point, is that when you really understand who you are in Jesus, when you understand who you are as a human being, it doesn't mean that it's going to sting less. It doesn't mean that it might not hurt your feelings. You know, I've had my feelings hurt by 50, 60-year-olds, and I've had my feelings hurt by a 5-year-old. And the funny thing about it is the 5-year-old, although he was just being a 5-year-old, it hurt my feelings. But instead of being mad at the 5-year-old, I started laughing because he said stuff that other people might have would have said, but he was the only one that said it because of his filters. And I think that once we're in tune with, you're going to have those days that your feelings are going to get hurt. There's going to be days you're going to be upset. There are going to be days that you're not going to like what people have said. But then you got to say, but what is my purpose and what is my assignment? If we remain on our assignment as individual, and everybody has an assignment.
Everyone.
And so, this year my theme is stay out the weeds, because so many people are caught up in the weeds and they're getting their life sucked out of them, and we don't even know who they are because they look just like a weed. And I'm like saying, God is telling us to stay out the weeds and be true to who we are, realizing that once you do that and you get out of the weeds and the camouflage is gone, people will come after you. But if you got God on your side, all they'll do is show you how to bob and weave. And many times they'll think that they've taken you out, but you still are strong rooted and will rise again. Yeah.
You're right. You're so right, Dr. Thompson. And as we move into this week of celebrating Dr. King's birthday, a couple of things I want to say that are taking place. Friday, the annual Jackie Robinson YMCA county breakfast is being held at the Scottish Rite Temple. This year, the number is reduced to 600 people, where pre-pandemic, it had grown to 1,600. And some people like you and myself, we were there from the first one. What was it, 20-some years ago?
Yeah.
And so we've lost a lot of those pioneers that we had. But that breakfast is a time where people are celebrating the life of Dr. King. And one of the things the Voice and Viewpoint is doing is we are putting out a 28-page special edition this week on the life and legacy of Dr. King. And it shows that he was more than I have a dream. Major speeches are in there. His letter from a Birmingham jail. To me, the greatest speech he ever gave was when he got the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, Norway. No one, black or white, to me, has ever given a speech as great as that speech. And even though we have excerpts in the paper, you can go to YouTube and pull it up and enjoy the whole thing. It's in its entirety.
Now, can I say something about this? And a lot of people believe that the speech on Washington, I Have a Dream, was the only time he ever did that speech. But that was a theme that he would share the I Have a Dream speech many times before he did it in Washington. But here's the thing I want to say. I'm going to take it upon myself today to say this. This is going to be an epic paper like it always is. But we want to encourage you all, for those of you guys that love this paper and you like what you see, instead of going and putting 50 cents into the receptacle and taking all the papers, that's what we call theft in the community. I just want to let you know it is theft. Instead of taking all the papers, if you want a handful of papers, literally come to the Voice and Viewpoint office and you can purchase as many papers as you want to. The biggest thing that, and I say this, Dr. Warren, that I've noticed, in our communities, why prices many times are higher is because they raise the prices because they assume that there's going to be a higher theft rate.
They call it the black tax.
You feel what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so the sad thing is when we do it to ourselves and we literally go in there and say, I paid 50 cents, I'm going to grab all these papers, and or I don't want to keep putting 50 cents in, so I'm just going to grab it and I'll get them later. No, let's do the right thing. Get one paper, and if you want more, just go to the office. You know what I'm saying?
Dr. Thompson, I appreciate you saying that, because not only in the stands, but the paper is actually online free.
Yeah.
As a part of a partnership that we have. And we give a couple thousand papers to churches every week. So there'll be churches but it's not enough for the entire congregation. It's enough for people to first come, first serve, and then they go from there to nursing homes, senior centers,
Prison.
And then they're for sale at over-the-counter and in newsstands. So it cost us a tremendous amount of money to put this paper out every week. As many of the printers closed, the Union Tribune, before they were sold to the LA Times, they had bought up all of the community papers going north from here to LA and put many of those printers out of business. So we have to pay large fees to have our paper imported in each week, several $100s just to get the paper here. And so there's a big cost with what we're doing. And we appreciate the confidence, but it would be nice if people purchase a copy if they want one. Now, this week at the Jackie Robinson breakfast, we're putting 650 papers on each seat for the people attending that breakfast on Friday morning. Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, UAMIC, the United African American Ministerial Action Council, is having a breakfast at the same location, Scottish Rite Temple. We're putting 400 papers on each chair for that event. That's 1,000 papers we're giving away right there in addition to what we already do. But I want to tell you that if you take this paper and you read it, you will get a reminded new insight into Dr. King. You will know that when he gave that speech on the mall, that he came there to let America know that we had been given a check that bounced for insufficient funds in terms of voting and all the things that we needed to have. If you go back to May of 1957, he gave a very powerful speech, which theme was "Give me the ballot." And if you give me the ballot, we'll elect the people that we need for what we need. And so when you go back and when you read the letter from the Birmingham jail, it was a letter that Dr. King wrote while he was in a cell with other people, and people smuggled toilet paper, paper bags, and he didn't have a pad or secretary to dictate the speech to. And he hand wrote it on all of these different pieces of paper and smuggled it out, and then they typed it up. And he chastised those people, those members of the clergy that were criticizing him for what he was doing. And so you show that you're going to have some criticism. Jesus had criticism. And the criticism can be real. It's how you take it, because remember, in my other life in politics, if I did something good for someone, a person would come to me and say, "Oh, thank you so much. How can we ever repay you?" And my response would be, "Remember the difference between Palm Sunday and Good Friday." And they would say, "Well, what do you mean?" The same people who waved the palm branches on Palm Sunday were the ones crying, "Crucify him" on Friday. And so people are fickle. And so people can't be your moral compass. Dr. King always talked about that moral compass. And God has to be the compass. And I think it was St. Augustine that made the statement, and very few people seem to remember it today. He said that when the laws of man conflict with the laws of God must preserve. And so that means that what is right and that's morally right, that moral arch that King spoke of, that how it bends, that when you know when you stand on righteousness, then you will be able to stand. And there is no weapon that man can bring against the spiritual rightness of people who stand that way. And I'm just excited that it's not over yet. I get excited all over again just thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think in 2023, it is a time for us to rise up again with the Lord leading the charge and really trusting Him to take us through every step that we have to go through. And that means that He must increase and we must decrease. And that's when we're going to really see our community get together, when we take down the egos and the personalities and everything else, and let's just have some real conversation. Let's talk about what's going to be best for the overall community. And again, here's the crazy thing. Dr. Warren, I've literally seen you in the Voice and Viewpoint literally change the lives of people in business just by putting the word out that they're in business. I believe that as an influencer, you must help make your community better. And for so long, my applause to the Voice and Viewpoint, for so long, you guys have been that steady beacon. Lots have come and lots have gone. But you guys have still, even in the lean months, when like, why are we doing this? You know what I'm saying? Because there are times in business and in the vision that God gives you that provisions might seem to be low, but yet and still, you still make it. And then before you realize it, you've made it through that test and that trial, and then here comes the overflow. But how do you use the overflow? A lot of times, you all use the overflow to get to the next thing to help the community to see. I always tell, we talk to kids and we say to the kids all the time, A lot of times our kids can't see what they can be or where they can go because they've never seen out of their community. So we literally have to take them out of the community, take them to the mountains, take them to different things so that they can literally begin to dream.
Well, you know what? We call that exposure expanding expectation.
Yes.
So if you are exposed to more, it expands your comprehension of what's available, and then you can work on your expectation. But when we talk about the pain and the hurt, which has beat a lot of us down, you know, there was a Lebanese poet by the name of Khalil Gibran many years ago, and he wrote a piece called "The Prophet." And in one of the scenes in this book, as he's beginning to leave this village, and the people are asking him questions about things in life, the prophet has said to him, says, "Speak to us of pain, joy, and sorrow." And Gibran says to her that you open your hand and you see the crevices and the deep lines in your hand that are there. And he says that those lines so many times have been trenches dug with pain and sorrow and hardship. But the good news is the deeper the crevice, the greater the capacity to contain the joy that follows. And so there's always joy that follows, okay? And Psalms 34 helps stress that. You know, when it says that weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And I just think that when you get back to this thing where you have this peace we're talking about, you get excited about what can I do and how can I do it and where can I turn to make a difference, and you want to be there. And so you and I know that we've been inviting people to come and be a part again of Black Men and Women United. We've been together some 15 years doing this, and all they have to do at this point to be a part of it is just call or email the Voice and Viewpoint with your email address. We put you on the list for the mail out. It's a Zoom call every Tuesday morning from 8 till about 9:15. We talk to each other about things that we're concerned about. There's only one caveat: you got to be African American to participate. And you know, some people don't like that, but it's a family thing.
Well, it's really to create a safe space for leaders and community people to come together that are of African and African descent, and we could have real conversation. And we try to make it where then we don't go back out and then air everything that's been talked about or do a report out. I think it's important, and I look at this and I applaud. So let me do my applauding. You know, I applaud my Muslim brothers because if we prayed 5 times a day consistently, religiously as they did, or they do, how much better would we as Christians be overall? You know, so I applaud them. I applaud my Latino brothers and sisters because throughout the whole entire pandemic, with all the restaurants and everything closing, I did not see one taco shop shut down.
Not one.
You know, and so whatever they are doing to make their product be accessible. So instead of hating on somebody for being successful, let's applaud them and let's learn. And one of the things I watch them do is they come together. You know what I'm saying?
They do.
If you look at downtown, you know, when they're making all these rules and regulations, I was like, did you see? I went downtown, high-end restaurants, and I saw little mini grills of people walking around frying up or frying up hot dogs, baking hot dogs, and all this stuff. And people coming out and like, oh, that's fast food. Let me grab it. And they're making a killing with low overhead. But then if we would suggest that to somebody, oh no, that's beneath me. But I told a kid one time, have you ever thought about being a window washer?
Oh no.
And he said, oh no, not a window washer. And so I took this kid to one of my friends that was a window washer. And he was on like the 18th floor of a high rise. And he was sitting up there, hands still hard, and I said, I want to introduce you to somebody. And he said, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a window washer. And the guy said, and you're here? He said, well, yeah. I started off with low windows, and now every skyscraper in San Diego, we do the windows for. And so And he said, really? He said, oh yeah, they have to pay us $300,000 or $400,000 now to wash the skyscraper windows. And he was like, really? He came back and said, it don't look that bad to be a window washer.
No.
So, but there's certain things that we say are beneath us, but it's a big industry.
And the world has changed to a service-oriented economy, and we are the ones that don't want to wait on anyone just because we've had a history of servitude. But we can't let the history interfere with what we want to do. You know, when in our business, we've cleaned the toilets and stayed late and cleaned up behind folks and did all those things. But that's part of being in business. That's what it takes. And so we just have to have the drive. And there are hard times. We've had very difficult times. But if someone asked me today, if I gave you the choice over the past 35 years between giving you $1 million to go into business and you're going into business with nothing the way you went into business, which one would you take? I would take the going into the business with nothing because I learned everything along the way. And I know people who had the $1 million and didn't last 6 months in business because they didn't know what they were doing with it, see. And so the wisdom makes a difference. And I'm hoping that we're reaching some folks tonight. We're preparing for our annual gala. We're going to be giving some awards. But I'm spending a little time with this because when it comes to this weekend, the parade on Sunday and all of these events honoring Dr. King, there are going to be people coming to want to hold hands and saying, we shall overcome. We should be singing, we overcame, you know, and we don't need to be going backwards. And if you look closely and listen to people, a lot of the folks quoting Dr. King, the only difference between them and the people in the Klan is that they just not wearing their sheets. But they will come up and speak up, and they know the key parts that they want to quote. But these are the same people that were out to get him or out to kill him and did kill him eventually. So let's not be weary in well doing, for our season does come.
With that being said, this is from the desk of the editor. We want you to stay tuned over the next few months. We have some great interviews. We're expanding to an international audience, and we have many more great things coming. Please, if you have an opportunity, download the app GOD Radio 1 on your Android or your Apple device, as well as the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint. They have a full operational app that you can get news on a study. Not just the paper, but minute-by-minute news with a tick feeder on there. So we want you to make sure that you have both apps, and stay tuned. Much more to come. I want you to operate in the grace of God. Do not operate out of anger. Operate out of focus, and knowing that if you stay focused, in the end, you will win. Dr. Warren.
Peace unto you, and keep God first.
Be blessed. Wait 1 second.